Guys ready for a um, Woody Allen quote? So he says, "It's clear the future holds opportunities. It also holds pitfalls. The trick will be to seize the opportunities, avoid the pitfalls, and get back home by 6 o'clock." Um, and this is one of the great rules to live by. Never take oneself too seriously. Oftentimes we look at ourselves in life kind of in a black and white. That there's this and then there's that. There's this and then there's that. And Woody Allen points out that just with a little bit of humor, that we can be home by 6 o'clock. I just think that's really fun, and that we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. And when we get into absolutes, black and white, the either or thinking, we tend to get away from some of the more nuanced parts of life. Life is really lived in the gray. And so, one way to kind of stay in the gray, at least it's been for me, is to not take life so seriously, have a little levity, a little bit of humor, because whenever we live in extremes, man, and we are seeing a lot of extremes these days, but when we live in extremes, we can't see clearly. And part of the biggest challenge of life in general is to see the shades of gray. So, good morning, everyone. We are still in chapter 5, but we're nearing the end of this book, and it's pretty exciting that we've spent the past almost a third of a year going over this. Isn't that interesting? And how amazing is that? So we are going to pick up with um, um, chapter 5, Mishnah 18, I believe, and Yehuda ben Tema says. So I don't so there's a lot of different rabbis, and as you probably know, and I don't know much about this particular rabbi. So more study for me. I'll get to look into that. And so Rabbi Yehuda ben, and it doesn't say rabbi here. So that's an interesting thing too, is that not all of our rabbis are rabbis. The most famous rabbi that's not a rabbi is Hillel. Hillel was before the idea of a rabbi. We call him Rabbi Hillel, but this was before this idea of what a rabbi was. And so that's interesting. So anyways, Yehuda ben Tema says, "Be bold as a leopard, light as an eagle, swift as a deer, brave as a lion to carry out the will of your Father in heaven, or your parent in heaven." And this is there's a lot of imagery here. And be bold as a leopard, light as an eagle, swift as a deer, and brave as a lion to carry out the will of God. And these parallels and the imagery of animals, you don't really see it too much in the Torah. What we do is often you do see eagle quite a bit, and you do see lion, like the Lion of Judah. You do see that, but outside of that, really a donkey that we learn about in Numbers. But there's not really an imagery of God, and the relationship between God and people, and the parallel between animals. And here, usually you'll see it with lion, you'll see it with eagle, but not necessarily the deer and not necessarily the leopard. So that's just a side note. So what is this all to say? This is all to say so this is my take on it, is that we ought to look at our natural environment to get clues, get inferences, get an understanding of the world in which we live. You can observe from the leopard boldness. You can observe from the eagle lightness. You can observe from the deer a swiftness, a grace, actually. You can see so much. And you can see brave and strength from a lion. And if you ever have been in a place where you can see animals, you can and nature and being out in nature. A lot of people talk about being in nature and being able to kind of connect with God. While that may be true, there is a part of it that we should learn how to serve God through our experiences with nature and natural phenomena. How do we learn? Anyone that's experienced a thunderstorm, there is an awesomeness to that. Many of our Psalms, the book of Psalms that we look at, many of those books are the author's experience with natural phenomena, lightning and thunder and great storm rolling across the mountains. And in this case, we look towards, at least in this Mishnah, we look towards animals as a way in which to show us how to serve. Um, and that we can learn from this. And one animal, if you look, you've seen this, is that insects and ants, is that they are able to carry, using an ant, for example, is able to carry a tremendous amount of weight compared to its body weight. And that what can we learn from that? And the structure that they have, and they work together in unison. And so we can look and we observe the world in which we are living to get hints into how we can better serve God and our people. And so one of the takeaways from this is spend a moment in nature, spend a moment outside, and look around and see what you can learn, what hints you get from your experiences and your observations of the world that you're in on how to better serve. And these are some very obvious. I don't know if they're so obvious, but right, we look at the brave. We all know, right, the lion is brave, right? The imagery is even in modern times with the what is that movie? The Yellow Brick Road, and I'm blanking on it. Anyways, it's been a long morning already. If I can't remember, The Wizard of Oz. There it is. The Wizard of Oz, right? The lion needs courage, right? So there are certain characteristics associated with animals, but I think the important thing is that what can we see and what can we learn from phenomena, natural phenomena around us, and he continues to say the brazen is headed for Gehenna. I hope that's what he says here. Let me look at the Hebrew. Yeah, Gehenna. The brazen is headed to Gehenna, but the shamefaced for heaven. So these are um, he takes another kind of twist on one's attitude. So how it is that you interact with the world. Yehuda ben Tema says basically the brazen, those who are the false pride. Let's put it that way. False pride. They're going to Gehenna is Gehenna is really the underworld, the place where the opposite of heaven, and the brazen, the people who are, as I'm translating it, really false pride. Is there's something that the ego is completely out of control. They're headed for there is no great reward where they're headed, but the shamefaced for heaven. And a better translation, I think, shame. We're not really. Shame is always kind of has a negative kind of take in our modern understanding, meaning that there's a sense of failure, a deep sense of failure. I think of maybe a better translation would be really that there's a sense of responsibility, right? When you feel guilty, you didn't uphold your responsibility. So when we're guilty, we've done something, and that there is a part of us that knows that we ought to have not done that, or we could do better, or what we didn't do it well, that kind of stuff. And that when we have that sense in ourselves, when we have that sense in ourselves, that moral compass, some people, there's a lot of different names for that. That person, that awareness, that ability to kind of realize that there is an importance for us to grow and change and be better and do better, and that we're on a trajectory to something, that there is purpose in what we do, there is meaning and responsibility and all these things. That person will inherit heaven here, but the Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. So let's look at the opposite then, the person that is incapable of looking at themselves, reflecting on themselves, looking at their behavior, not taking responsibility, right? And much of what I believe is that whenever the our sages or the Torah uses or tradition uses these words like Gan Eden and Gehenna and these the afterworld and the good and the bad, it isn't in my opinion this idea of where we will go. It is what we create here. So you can easily see that somebody who doesn't take responsibility, who is never wrong, right, and has all those characteristic traits, what kind of world are they living in? Nobody really wants to be around them. They don't really have any close relationships. Their intimacy with other people is very limited. They're not communicating. People don't trust, right? All of those things. And that we can create a world in which isn't really exciting to live in. On the other hand, people who are quick to see where they can grow, or are quick to admit mistakes, people who take responsibility and quickly move on, right? Isn't it more? It's easier to be around that person, and the world that they create is one filled with intimate relationships. So and is filled with love and tolerance and kindness. Now I'm using these as kind of airy fluffy ways to look at it and making the other a more negative. We all have varied traits, but we create by our behaviors the world in which we live, right? Okay, so moving on. May it be your will, God, our Lord and the Lord of our fathers, that the temple be rebuilt speedily in our days and grant us our portion in your Torah. Interesting. So what happens here is that Yehuda ben Tema brings in a prayer. And over the course of the past several months since we've been doing this, not once has there been really a prayer. Is that right? So it's really kind of cool that built within this what they call Pirkei Avot, or sayings of the fathers, or really this ethical teachings, right? That's what we've been talking about: ethics, morals, behaviors, right? All these different things. In the middle of it is a little bit of a prayer. And that's kind of interesting, and it's definitely out of the flow of what we've been doing. And it's a Yehi Ratzon, and we do these all the time, to prepare for prayer, to set intention, kavana, to set the way our mindset is going to be before we enter into prayer. So what does it say? Yehi Ratzon mifanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'elhei avotenu, and that's the formula. That's the formula that's used. This is really a prayer. That's kind of cool. Avotenu. So he literally goes on to say that the temple be rebuilt speedily in our days. So the temple obviously has been. And here it's really interesting because the translation says the temple, but it's ircha here in the text in the Hebrew. Shetifnei ircha bimhera v'yameinu v'ten chelkenu b'toratecha. That you will build your city, presumably Jerusalem, that the place in which we interact with God and we had the most intimate relationship. Notice the importance here of how we behave and where it is that we can connect most with God. Where is that intimate relationship? Is, of course, in our tradition, Jerusalem, or Ircha, God's city, your city. May you build it speedily in our days and give us our portion of your Torah, meaning, can we connect with God? What is the purpose of everything, right? The purpose is to ultimately serve God. And that's what he kind of started off. Intention, prayer, meditation. How do you get the mindset? And I think this is a neat little a little couple of paragraphs to get somebody, this is again my opinion, to get somebody in the right mindset to enter into prayer. How so? What do I mean by that? Remember that he started off with giving us the visual. Be like this animal, observe nature, get into the mindset of how to best serve God. When we're doing these things, when we're observing, when we're looking around, we're taking in things, we're thinking about things, we're being active in our engagement with the world. That is meditative. right? Meditation, of course, really means to, if you look it up in a dictionary, it really means to do some deep thinking, to really think and have thought around it. So when we observe the world in which we do, which we live, and we really look at it, that gets us in the right mindset. Remember, not to be brazen. He talks about being what I was calling that false pride. We want to be, understand that we have responsibility. Shamefaced, again, is a little strong, but that we want, at least the translation, I believe, is a little strong, but we want to have that person that says, look, I have that sense of what can I do better? What have I done in the past day, or in what has happened in the past that I can do better? What can I add to the stream of life? Understanding that there is more that I need to do, that we're on a path. And then, of course, then we're ready to enter into prayer, right? Nobody's perfect. So in short, observe the world. Take a minute to meditate. Nobody's perfect. Let's say a prayer. And with that mindset, my gosh, right? My gosh. So it's kind of funny to me that sometimes when speaking about religion or tradition, it's never. Oftentimes when we look at these ancient texts, they're saying things that we already kind of know. That is inherent in our understanding of the world, and it's just said a little different because, of course, their language was different. Of course, their experiences where they're experiencing the same world that you and I are experiencing, but their language is different, and the way they approach it might be a little different. And so part of it is breaking down the language, because if I were to come to you and say, quite simply, before you pray, take a minute and meditate and understand and have a little humility, you'd be like, oh, that makes sense, right? And that's what he's saying. Meditate, get to a humble position, get into a humble mindset, and then offer prayers. And we all know, right? We just know what I'm saying to you makes sense, right? It's not like crazy. It's not beyond the realm of possibility, and it's not beyond logic that makes the most sense. If you really want to offer prayers, or really kind of internally look at oneself and get into a prayerful mindset, what better way to do it than have a little humility and meditate beforehand? Right, makes sense. That's what he's saying. That's, at least in my opinion, that's what he's saying in a little bit different language. Let's do one more. Ben Bagbag says, yeah, that's his name, Bagbag. Omer, learn it, the Torah. Uh, I love this word. It's hafach ba v'hafach ba. And if you want to order in Israel, in modern Israel, if you order a hafuch, it just means basically a cappuccino, like with milk and coffee. That's a hafuch, and that just means flipped. And that's what the same root here. Modern Hebrew is lovely. They take they take the words that they're able to take and created a language about 150 years ago. But one of the words here is that it says here, learn it and learn it, but it literally means flip it over, flip it over. Hafach, to really just flip it over, not necessarily just sit and learn it, but that you're engaged in it. You're flipping it over. You're using the Torah in a way in which to be a lens and a prism in which to look through to enter into the world. Flip it over. Find what you need, and that's what really often what we do in our Torah studies, what we're doing here is we're looking at things and we're trying to get new. It's called a chidush, a new way in which to look at it, engage it. It's not here just to sit on the shelf and to not be engaged. So turn it, flip it over, look at it, take a look at the Torah. It's not going to bite you. Get into it, and I just think that that's really important. For everything is in it. So that's the next phase. Is that what you're looking for? You will find. Have you ever read a book and you said something like into yourself, I never saw that before? If you have your favorite book and or your favorite Torah portion or something like that you really kind of revisit, and favorite movie or something, and each time you see it or you experience it, you see new things you never thought I've seen it a million times and I never saw that before. I've read that a million times and I never heard that before, right? And everything, at least according to our tradition, is in the Torah that we bring because we bring our own experiences, what we're having right now up to date, what we're doing right now, all of our experiences, right, that we bring. And because we return to the Torah on a regular basis, it's something that at least traditionally we read 3 times in public a week, right? Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. But of course, one ought to study Torah on a daily basis. You're bringing yourself to each of those moments of experience and study. Right. So, frankly, if we were to flip right over and start on page 1 of these, the Pirkei Avot of these Mishnahs, and we could look back, and I would be saying something totally different. Maybe some of the same stuff, but my experience would reflect on the commentary. Isn't that right? Right. So that would actually be an interesting thing to do, is to see how much I contradict myself and so on. But I'm bringing my experience. How is it that we can't view our Torah right now through the lens of the COVID pandemic, of our race relations right now, our situation in which our country seems very, very split, and is split on many levels. How do we not bring that to our conversation when we're studying, and how do we not bring that to our experiences when we're engaging in the Torah? Last year, that wasn't. There was no way. And then in the year to come, it will be very, very different. But the Torah, which is really important, the words remain the same. Our experiences really dictate how we read and understand it. So when they're talking about flipping and flipping it, is that be engaged in it. Be engaged. Look at the consistency of the Torah and have that help us guide how we can engage in the world. So that's really my experience as well, and I'm sure it's your experience as well, is that when we have something that is a consistent, we can reflect and see how we have changed, grown, and how we are experiencing something. Okay, and it'll tell you, like, it'll be really interesting to look at some of these videos. If we look after in a year, you'll see it is really being influenced by the world in which we live. Okay, and finally, and I've just been rambling a little bit. And finally, each commentary in each generation brings its own questions to the text and to history and to our experience, right? The questions that we have today are much different than the questions that people brought to the tradition 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Okay, so let's do this. With it, you will see, right? So this is what we talked about it. So turn it over, turn the Torah over and over, for everything is in it. And with it, you will see. Grow old and gray over it, and do not stir from it, for there is nothing more edifying for you than it. Ben Hehe says, commensurate with the painstaking effort is the reward. And and we're going to start with a great Mishnah tomorrow, but I just wanted to end here with the importance of what is it that you return to on a regular basis. Of course, our Torah says it is, our tradition says it's the Torah. What do you engage in on a regular basis that can help you and bind you to a daily living? And for our tradition, it's the Torah. That is what roots us. That is the roots, right? The tree of life. That is the roots. Everything comes from that. And but take a look at what you do. Some people, in a modern sense, some people it's a daily exercise. If you, right, and I'll just use this as kind of a visual. If you're out, I'm not a jogger, but if you're a jogger and you go out every morning at this specific time in the morning, every morning for years, you're going to have a base point in which to view that particular section of your life. When the sun comes up, the people that you engage in, the street cleaning, the garbage, the kids going to school, right? You start to experience and see the world through the lens of that one thing. And that's just a one example. And here, the continued experience with Torah and using it as that kind of lens, will obviously have wonderful effect. Let's find time in which to use this as a practice, and I think many of us have done that over the course of the past couple of months, is using this 11 o'clock hour to kind of sit and just reflect. And that has been a basis, I think, for many of people's study, not just us, but when you set a time and you go into the study, it can be a lens. So let's continue tomorrow. We will be on Mishnah 20, finishing up chapter 5, Mishnah 20, and then we'll be in chapter 6, is the chapter in which we started some months ago. And anyways, and in any event, have a wonderful, wonderful day, and be well.